In an era where companies seek to streamline hiring, artificial intelligence, AI, is increasingly used to power recruitment systems. This presentation examines AI-powered recruitment, balancing efficiency, ethics, and regulations. The central inquiry asks to what extent AI recruitment systems reduce human bias while introducing new ethical and regulatory risks. Addressing this question requires a careful, evidence-based approach. We will draw on a real-world case and 3 key analyses by Wilson and Caliskin, Z. Chen, and the UK Information Commissioner's Office. The topic is framed by core course concepts, values and ethics, 2.7, and artificial intelligence, 3.6, highlighting the moral implications and technological context of AI in hiring. As background, AI-driven tools are adopted in recruitment to improve efficiency and objectivity. Automated systems can process resumes or conduct preliminary interviews at scale, theoretically minimizing human prejudices by applying uniform criteria. The appeal lies in the promise of impartial decision-making. For example, algorithms can ignore information, like a candidate's name or gender during screening. However, despite the growing use of AI in hiring, regulatory oversight remains sparse. Few laws currently mandate audits to ensure these systems are fair. Researchers caution that without proper safeguards, AI can inadvertently perpetuate discrimination, meaning that increased efficiency might come at the cost of equity and accountability. This context sets the stage for exploring both the benefits and the risks of AI recruitment. Striking real-world example is Amazon's attempt to automate hiring. In 2014, Amazon developed an AI resume screening system intended to reduce human bias by learning from past hiring data. Yet instead of neutrality, the AI absorbed the company's historical bias. Because the technical hires over the previous decade were about 60% male, the algorithm learned to favor male candidates. It began penalizing resumes that mentioned women's terms, for instance, women's college, resulting in fewer positive rankings for those applicants. Empirical results were telling. The AI selected around 40% of male applicants but only 20% of female applicants, clearly favoring men with identical qualifications. By 2018, amid concerns over transparency and discrimination, Amazon scrapped the system. This case demonstrates that an AI tool, even when aimed at fairness, can end up reinforcing biases present in its training data instead of eliminating them. This issue lies at the intersection of technology and ethics. In terms of course concepts, it exemplifies values and ethics. 2.7. AI hiring raises concerns about fairness, discrimination, transparency, and responsibility. These systems are often branded as objective, yet biased training data can lead to unjust outcomes, challenging fundamental values of equality and accountability. It also squarely involves artificial intelligence. 3.6. As machine learning algorithms drive these recruitment tools, AI enables faster, large-scale processing of job applications, showing how algorithmic decisions can directly impact human opportunities. This context underlines why balancing efficiency with ethical and regulatory considerations is crucial. The first key source is a 2025 study by Kira Wilson and Alan Caliskin, published by the Brookings Institution. As experts in algorithmic fairness, they investigated bias in AI resume screening. Their experiment took over 550 actual resumes and systematically altered only the candidate names to represent different genders and ethnicities, then submitted them to a screening algorithm. The outcome revealed persistent discrimination. Resumes with white and male associated names were ranked significantly higher by the AI, whereas identical resumes with female or black male names received lower rankings. In other words, the AI favored candidates based purely on name-based demographic cues, despite identical qualifications. This finding shows that the AI system did not eliminate bias from hiring. Rather, it continued the biases present in the historical data on which it was trained. Notably, Wilson and Caliskin report that their results align with other research and even regulators' observations, underscoring the need for transparency and stricter oversight of AI in recruitment. One limitation of their study is that it was a simulation, not an audit of a specific company's system, so real-world outcomes might be moderated by human oversight or in additional hiring stages. Nonetheless, this source provides strong empirical evidence that AI hiring tools can replicate discriminatory patterns unless actively mitigated. The second source is a 2023 article by Zhisheng Chen titled Ethics and Discrimination in Artificial Intelligence-Enabled Recruitment Practices. Published in Humanities and Social Sciences Communications, it offers a broad analysis of how AI impacts fairness in hiring. Chen's study compiles evidence of biases in various AI hiring contexts. For instance, it discusses the case of Amazon's biased hiring algorithm as a cautionary tale, where the AI unintentionally learned to downgrade female candidates due to training on male-dominated resumes. Such incidents illustrate a wider point. AI systems tend to mirror the biases of their input data and design, rather than act as neutral arbiters. These biases are often inadvertent, a product of algorithms absorbing historical prejudices, yet they have real consequences for equality in the job market. To address this problem, Chen advocates both technical and governance remedies. Technically, developers should improve training data and algorithms to avoid perpetuating prejudice, for example, by using more balanced datasets and deploying bias detection tools. On the governance side, Chen calls for stronger oversight, transparency requirements, and ethical guidelines to hold AI systems accountable. This source reinforces the view that without deliberate intervention, AI-driven recruitment can end up perpetuating discrimination under the guise of efficiency. The third source is a 2024 report by the UK Information Commissioner's Office, ICO, the National Regulator for Data Protection and Privacy, titled AI and Recruitment Outcomes. This report details an official audit of AI recruitment tools in real companies. The ICO's investigators examine how these systems operate in practice, what data they collect, how their decision algorithms work, and whether they comply with fairness and transparency principles. The findings expose several problems. First, some AI tools were filtering out candidates based on protected characteristics, meaning the algorithms directly or indirectly discriminated by gender, race, age, or other sensitive attributes. Second, even when demographic data weren't explicitly provided, the algorithms could infer sensitive traits from other information, for example, deducing a candidate's ethnicity or gender from their name, introducing hidden bias in scoring. Third, many systems were collecting excessive personal data not needed for the hiring decision, raising privacy concerns alongside bias. Lastly, there was a lack of transparency. Candidates often were not informed about how the AI made its decisions, so they had little insight into a recourse against unfavorable outcomes. In response, the ICO report recommends robust measures: regular testing for fairness and accuracy, constant bias monitoring, increased transparency to applicants, minimization of data collection, ensuring explainability of the algorithm's logic, and strengthened oversight of these tools. The report acknowledges limitations. Regulators can only see what companies volunteer. They have no legal right yet to inspect proprietary algorithms without consent. And the focus is on UK law, which may not directly apply elsewhere. Even so, the ICO's work is highly influential. It validates the kinds of bias documented by Wilson and Kaliskin and Chen, for example, confirming that name-based discriminations can occur, and has been used as an official guide for companies applying AI in hiring. Crucially, the ICO concludes that meaningful reduction of bias is possible only with strong, ongoing oversight and high standards of transparency in place. Looking at these sources together, a clear Zurich consensus emerges. All the evidence indicates that AI recruitment systems have not eradicated bias. On the contrary, they often reproduce the same biases in new forms. Wilson and Kaliskin's experiment demonstrated this empirically. An AI consistently favored resumes from one demographic, white men, over others, despite identical credentials. Chen's analysis echoed that point with real-world examples, showing that Amazon's hiring AI and similar tools reflected the prejudices embedded in their training data. Similarly, the ICO's audits found biased outcomes and questionable practices in actual hiring software, from gender and racial disparities in screening to opaque decision-making criteria. Each source approached the issue from a different angle: academic simulation, scholarly review, and regulatory investigation. Yet they arrived at compatible conclusions. Notably, all three sources underscore the need for intervention to make AI hiring fair. Wilson and Kaliskin, for example, call for independent audits of hiring algorithms and greater transparency to protect candidates, emphasizing that policy solutions are necessary to prevent discrimination. Chen likewise advocates for ethical guidelines and oversight, and the ICO provides concrete guidelines and enforcement recommendations. There are some differences in emphasis. The Brookings study and Chen's work focus on identifying bias and suggesting broad safeguards, whereas the ICO, as a regulator, focuses on compliance and practical remedies. However, together these findings paint a comprehensive picture of AI recruitment's dual-edged sword. It offers efficiency, but can embed and even amplify bias without proper checks. This convergence of evidence strongly informs our overall evaluation. With these insights, we consider the core question of bias reduction versus new risks. On one hand, AI recruitment systems do offer the potential to reduce certain human biases. By automating early hiring stages, they apply uniform criteria to all candidates, eliminating the capricious judgments or overt prejudices that an individual recruiter might have. For example, an algorithm can be programmed to ignore demographic details entirely and focus only on qualifications. This consistency can curb some forms of conscious or unconscious bias in decision-making. However, the reduction of bias through AI is limited. As the evidence shows, AI models trained on historical data tend to inherit the biases in that data. They may remove a human's personal bias, yet they learn to favor the demographics that were historically advantaged, as seen when Amazon's system effectively became biased against women by mimicking past hiring patterns. In practice, these tools often end up reflecting society's existing inequalities back at us through an automated process. Moreover, AI introduces distinct new risks. One major concern is the lack of transparency. Decisions by complex algorithms are often a black box, meaning neither candidates nor hiring managers can easily understand why the AI accepted or rejected a given applicant. This opacity makes it difficult to hold anyone accountable or to contest a potentially unfair decision. Additionally, biases in AI can scale quickly. A flawed algorithm could quietly discriminate against thousands of applicants before its effects are noticed, shifting the locus of bias from individual people to inscrutable systems. These factors create an urgent need for new ethical safeguards and regulatory oversight to accompany AI in recruitment. In sum, while BI systems can standardize processes and potentially reduce some overt human bias, they do not inherently make hiring fair. Without intervention, they risk encoding old biases into new machinery, trading one set of bias problems for another. This trade-off must be managed carefully through ethics and regulation. Looking ahead, the trajectory of AI in recruitment is prompting stronger governance and accountability measures. Policymakers and regulators are increasingly aware that intervention is needed to ensure these tools are used responsibly. In the near future, we can expect more legal frameworks specifically addressing AI hiring. For instance, the European Union's forthcoming ETSIDI Act designates recruitment algorithms as high-risk systems, subjecting them to stringent requirements for bias, mitigation, transparency, and human oversight. This means companies deploying hiring AI in the EU will be legally required to audit their models and demonstrate they are not discriminatory. Other jurisdictions are moving in a similar direction. Data protection authorities like the UK ICO have signaled that scrutinizing AI in recruitment will be a regulatory priority, and they have issued detailed guidelines to ensure compliance with fairness and privacy laws. In the United States, although no federal law is in place yet, agencies such as the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission are examining AI hiring tools and issuing guidance to enforce anti-discrimination statutes in the employment context. Industry is also starting to adopt accountability practices. Companies are beginning to implement regular algorithmic bias audits, using internal teams or external experts to test and correct their hiring AI systems. There is a push for greater transparency as well. For example, informing candidates when AI is used in the selection process and providing explanations for automated decisions. The concept of AI accountability is gaining traction, meaning developers and employers must be able to explain and justify how their algorithms make decisions. The future of AI-powered recruitment will likely be shaped by a combination of technological fixes and robust governance. Through laws, regulations, and best practices, the goal is to harness AIs. In conclusion, AI-powered recruitment systems provide only a partial remedy to human bias, and they undeniably introduce significant new ethical and regulatory challenges. These systems can increase efficiency and consistency in hiring, removing some immediate prejudices of individual recruiters. However, as we have seen, they often end up reproducing biases from their training data and obscuring the decision process in a complex algorithmic black box. Thus, the extent to which they reduce bias is quite limited. They might reduce certain overt biases, but not the underlying patterns of discrimination. At the same time, they create serious risks, from inadvertent algorithmic discrimination on a large scale to problems of transparency, accountability, and privacy. The Amazon case and our 3 studies make it clear that without careful oversight, AI will not automatically make hiring fairer. Instead, it could reinforce existing inequities under the veneer of objectivity. Therefore, to answer the inquiry question, AI recruitment systems can diminish human bias to a modest extent, but they also bring substantial new ethical dilemmas and regulatory imperatives. Realizing the beneficial potential of AI in hiring, reducing bias and improving fairness, will depend on implementing strict regulations, continuous bias auditing, and strong ethical frameworks for AI design and use. Only through such accountability measures can we ensure that efficiency gains do not come at the expense of equality. Ultimately, AI in recruitment must be managed carefully so that it serves as a tool to advance fairness rather than as a sophisticated mirror of our past biases. Finally, this slide displays the references for all sources cited throughout the presentation. It includes the works by Wilson and Keliskin, 2025, Jisheng Chen, 2023, the UK ICO report, 2024, and other relevant publications that inform this investigation. These references underpin the evidence and arguments presented. This concludes the presentation. Thank you.